The deep ocean may be the most remote and inhospitable environment on our planet, but it is also one of the most important repositories of human history. In the crushing depths, where no natural light has ever shone, these shipwrecks wait patiently to tell their stories to anyone brave enough and technologically capable enough to visit them. Tonight, we will make that journey together, descending through miles of dark water to visit 5 of the most significant shipwrecks ever discovered. We will witness the ghostly beauty of the Titanic's grand staircase, explore the cargo holds of a World War II freighter still packed with military supplies, swim through the hangar deck of a sunken aircraft carrier, marvel at the intricate carvings of a 17th-century warship, and examine the mysterious bronze gears of an ancient computer that challenges everything we thought we knew about the technological capabilities of the ancient world. These are the deepest shipwrecks ever discovered, and they are waiting to share their secrets with us. 2.5 miles beneath the North Atlantic's surface, in a realm of eternal darkness and crushing pressure, lies the most famous shipwreck in history. The RMS Titanic, once hailed as the pinnacle of human engineering and luxury, now rests broken and silent on the abyssal plain. Her magnificent hull split in two, her opulent interiors slowly surrendering to the relentless advance of time and the sea. At a depth of 12,500 feet, the Titanic lies deeper than Mount Fuji is tall. The pressure at this depth is over 375 times greater than at sea level, enough to crush a human body instantly, enough to implode a conventional submarine like a tin can. The water temperature hovers just above freezing at 36 degrees Fahrenheit, and the darkness is absolute, broken only by the occasional bioluminescent creature drifting through the wreck like a ghost through an abandoned mansion. For 73 years after her sinking on April 15, 1912, the Titanic remained lost, her exact location unknown, despite numerous attempts to find her. The ship had become legend, her story told and retold in books, films, and countless retellings that often blurred the line between fact and fiction. But the physical reality of the ship herself remained hidden in the depths, a mystery that tantalized explorers and researchers around the world. The search for the Titanic became one of the most famous quests in maritime archaeology. Numerous expeditions scoured the North Atlantic, using increasingly sophisticated technology to probe the ocean floor. The search area was vast. The ship could have been anywhere within a zone covering hundreds of square miles of ocean floor. Early attempts relied on crude sonar and primitive underwater cameras, technology that was barely adequate for the monumental task at hand. The breakthrough came in 1985 when Dr. Robert Ballard, working with a joint American-French expedition, finally located the wreck using advanced deep-sea exploration technology. The discovery was made not by finding the ship itself, but by following a trail of debris that led to the main wreck site. Ballard's team first spotted a massive boiler lying on the ocean floor, then followed the debris field until they came upon the ship's bow section, rising from the sediment like a ghost from the past. The moment of discovery was both triumphant and sobering. Here was the ship that had captured the world's imagination, but she was not the intact vessel that many had hoped to find. The Titanic had broken apart during her sinking, with the bow and stern sections lying nearly 2,000 feet apart, connected by a vast debris field containing everything from pieces of the ship's hull to personal belongings of the passengers and crew. The bow section, which contains the ship's most recognizable features, sits upright on the ocean floor, buried up to her name in sediment, despite the catastrophic damage that sent her to the bottom. The bow section retains much of her original grandeur. The ship's bridge, where Captain Edward Smith made his final decisions, still stands, though the wooden wheelhouse has long since rotted away. The massive anchor chains, each link weighing hundreds of pounds, drape over the bow like jewelry on a sleeping giant. Perhaps the most haunting feature of the bow section is the grand staircase, once the crown jewel of the ship's first-class accommodations. The ornate dome that once crowned this magnificent space has collapsed, but the staircase itself remains, its bronze cherub still standing guard over what was once the most elegant space afloat. The wooden steps have been consumed by wood-eating organisms, but the metal framework remains, creating a skeletal reminder of the ship's former glory. The stern section tells a different story, one of violent destruction and catastrophic collapse. When the ship broke apart during the sinking, the stern section was subjected to tremendous stresses that crushed and twisted the hull into an almost unrecognizable mass of metal. The stern sits at an angle, partially buried in sediment, its structure so damaged that it took years for researchers to definitively identify various parts of the wreckage. Between the bow and stern sections lies the debris field, a vast underwater museum that tells the story of the ship's final moments and the lives of those aboard her. Here, scattered across the ocean floor, are the personal belongings of passengers and crew. Leather suitcases, still intact after more than a century underwater, china plates bearing the White Star Line logo, bottles of wine and champagne, jewelry, coins, and countless other artifacts that bring human scale to this massive tragedy. The preservation of organic materials in the deep ocean is remarkable but selective. Leather goods, protected by their tanning, remain supple and intact. Metal objects, while subject to corrosion, often retain their basic structure for decades. But wood and fabric, attacked by deep-sea organisms, disappear relatively quickly. This selective preservation creates an eerie landscape where some objects appear almost new, while others have vanished entirely. One of the most poignant discoveries in the debris field is a pair of leather boots, still standing upright on the ocean floor exactly where their owner's body once lay. The boots, protected by their leather construction, survived while all organic material disappeared, creating a ghostly marker of human presence. Similar boot pairs have been found throughout the debris field, silent memorials to the 1,517 people who lost their lives when the ship sank. The Titanic's discovery revolutionized deep-sea archaeology and captured the public imagination in ways that few scientific discoveries have matched. The wreck site became a destination for researchers, filmmakers, and even tourists, willing to pay enormous sums for the privilege of visiting the ship in person. Each expedition has revealed new details about the ship's construction, her final moments, and the lives of those aboard her. Advanced imaging technology has allowed researchers to create detailed maps of the entire wreck site, revealing how the ship broke apart and settled on the ocean floor. High-definition cameras have captured images of extraordinary clarity, showing details that would have been impossible to see with earlier technology. Robotic submersibles have ventured deep into the ship's interior, exploring cabins, corridors, and cargo holds that have been sealed since the night of the sinking. The exploration of the Titanic has also raised important questions about the ethics of deep-sea archaeology. The ship is both a historical artifact and a grave site, containing the remains of over 1,500 people. Should it be explored and studied, or should it be left undisturbed as a memorial to those who died? Different expeditions have taken different approaches to this question, with some focusing on scientific research and others on recovery of artifacts. The debate over artifact recovery has been particularly contentious. Thousands of objects have been recovered from the debris field and are now displayed in museums around the world. Supporters argue that these artifacts help tell the story of the ship and her passengers, preserving history that would otherwise be lost to the sea. Critics contend that removing objects from the wreck site is tantamount to grave robbing and that the site should be protected from commercial exploitation. The condition of the Titanic continues to deteriorate as the years pass. The ship's steel hull is slowly being consumed by iron-eating bacteria that create the distinctive rusticles, icicle-like formations of rust that hang from the wreck like decorations on a Christmas tree. Scientists estimate that the ship's structure will continue to weaken and collapse over the coming decades, eventually reducing the mighty liner to a pile of rust and debris on the ocean floor. Recent expeditions have documented accelerating deterioration of the wreck. The ship's iconic crow's nest has collapsed, and portions of the deck are beginning to cave in. The bathtub in Captain Smith's cabin, long a popular photographic subject, has fallen through the deteriorating deck. These changes serve as reminders that even in the preserving environment of the deep ocean, time eventually claims everything. The Titanic's legacy extends far beyond her physical remains on the ocean floor. The ship has become a symbol of human hubris, technological overconfidence, and the eternal struggle between human ambition and natural forces. Her story has been told and retold in countless books, films, documentaries, and other media, each generation finding new meaning in the tragedy. The wreck has also contributed enormously to our understanding of deep-sea environments and the technology needed to explore them. The Titanic expeditions have driven advances in submersible design, underwater photography, robotic exploration, and deep-sea navigation. Many of the technologies developed for Titanic exploration have found applications in other fields, from offshore oil exploration to marine biology research. For many visitors to the wreck, whether in person or through documentary footage, the Titanic represents something more than just a shipwreck. She is a time machine, a direct connection to a lost world of Edwardian elegance and confidence. Walking through her corridors, even virtually, is like stepping back in time to an era when the future seemed bright and technology appeared capable of conquering any challenge. The Titanic rests now in her deep ocean grave, slowly returning to the elements from which she was forged. But her story continues to resonate more than a century after her sinking, reminding us of the fragility of human achievement and the eternal power of the sea. In the crushing depths of the North Atlantic, she waits patiently for the next generation of explorers to visit her and learn from her story. As we leave the Titanic behind and ascend from the depths, we carry with us the sobering reminder that even the mightiest achievements of human engineering are temporary. The ship that was once called unsinkable now lies broken on the ocean floor, a monument to both human ambition and human mortality. Yet in her preservation by the deep sea, she continues to teach us about our past and inspire us to build a better future. In the crystal-clear waters of the Red Sea, 100 feet beneath the surface near the Straits of Gubal, lies one of the most remarkable time capsules of World War II. The SS THISTLEGORM, a British cargo ship sunk by German bombers in 1941, rests on the sandy bottom, with her cargo holds still packed with the machinery of war: trucks, motorcycles, aircraft parts, ammunition, and supplies that were desperately needed by Allied forces in North Africa, but never reached their destination. Unlike the crushing depths where the Titanic lies, the THISTLEGORM rests in relatively shallow water where natural light can still penetrate, creating an underwater museum that divers can explore with relative ease. At 415 feet long, the ship is massive enough to dwarf most recreational divers, yet accessible enough that thousands of people have visited her over the decades since her rediscovery. She represents a unique intersection of historical significance, archaeological importance, and recreational diving accessibility. The THISTLEGORM was built in 1940 by Joseph Thompson and Sons in Sunderland, England, as part of the massive wartime shipbuilding program that aimed to replace merchant vessels lost to German U-boats and bombers. She was designed as a cargo ship, built for utility rather than elegance, with large holds capable of carrying the diverse mix of military supplies needed to sustain Allied forces around the world. At 4,898 gross tons, she was a substantial vessel, but not exceptional by the standards of her day. What made the THISTLEGORM special was not her size or speed, but her cargo and her mission. In September 1941, she was loaded at British ports with a diverse collection of military supplies destined for Allied forces fighting in North Africa. The cargo manifest read like an inventory of everything needed to sustain a modern army. Bedford trucks, BSA motorcycles, Bren gun carriers, aircraft parts, ammunition, boots, uniforms, and even railway locomotives destined for the Egyptian railway system. The ship's cargo was carefully arranged in her 5 holds, with heavier items like locomotives and trucks secured in the lower levels and lighter materials stored above. The loading process took weeks, as stevedores worked around the clock to pack as much material as possible into the available space. Every cubic foot was precious, as the dangerous journey around the Cape of Good Hope or through the Mediterranean meant that each ship had to carry maximum cargo to justify the risks involved. The THISTLEGORM's intended route took her around the Cape of Good Hope to the Red Sea, then north to Suez, where her cargo would be unloaded for transport to Allied forces fighting in the Western Desert. This route, while longer than the direct Mediterranean passage, was considered safer from German and Italian air attacks. However, as events would prove, nowhere in the wartime world was truly safe from enemy action. The ship's crew of 39 men was typical of British merchant sailors during the war, a mix of experienced seamen and younger men pressed into service by the demands of wartime shipping. They were led by Captain William Ellis, a veteran merchant officer who had already survived one torpedo attack earlier in the war. The crew knew they were sailing into dangerous waters, but they also understood the vital importance of their cargo to the war effort. By October 1941, the THISTLEGORM had successfully navigated the dangerous waters around Africa and entered the Red Sea. She was approaching the final leg of her journey when she received orders to anchor in a safe anchorage near Sha'ab Ali, a reef in the northern Red Sea. The anchorage was supposed to be a secure waiting area where ships could shelter while waiting for convoy escorts or favorable conditions for the final approach to Suez. What the THISTLEGORM's crew didn't know was that German intelligence had identified this anchorage as a gathering point for Allied shipping. The Luftwaffe had been conducting reconnaissance flights over the Red Sea, and German bombers based in occupied Crete were within range of the shipping lanes leading to Suez. The safe anchorage had become a target. On the night of October 6, 1941, 2 German Heinkel He-111 bombers took off from Crete on a mission to attack Allied shipping in the Red Sea. The aircraft were equipped with bombs and had been specifically tasked with targeting merchant vessels in the Suez approaches. The pilots had been briefed on the importance of disrupting Allied supply lines to North Africa, where German and Italian forces under Rommel were fighting British and Commonwealth troops. The bombers approached the anchorage in darkness, using the moon's reflection on the water to navigate. The THISTLEGORM, anchored peacefully with her precious cargo, was silhouetted against the lighter water, making her an easy target for the approaching aircraft. The ship's crew had no warning of the attack. Radar was not yet common on merchant vessels, and the night was quiet, except for the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. At approximately 1:30 a.m., the first bomber made its attack run, dropping 2 bombs that struck the ship near her stern. The explosions were devastating, but they were nothing compared to what happened next. The bombs had struck near the ship's ammunition storage, and within moments, the THISTLEGORM was rocked by a massive secondary explosion as her cargo of shells and explosives detonated. The explosion was so powerful that it broke the ship's back, splitting her hull and sending debris flying hundreds of feet into the air. The blast was heard for miles and lit up the night sky like a miniature sun. The force of the explosion was so great that it launched one of the ship's locomotives completely out of the cargo hold, where it landed on the seabed nearby, a testament to the incredible power of the detonation. 9 members of the crew were killed in the attack, including several men who were sleeping in quarters near the point of impact. The survivors, many of them injured and in shock, managed to launch lifeboats and escape the sinking ship. They were later rescued by other Allied vessels in the area, but their ship and her vital cargo were lost to the depths of the Red Sea. The THISTLEGORM sank quickly after the explosion, settling upright on the sandy bottom in about 100 feet of water. The ship's superstructure was heavily damaged by the blast, but her cargo holds remained largely intact, preserving their contents in the dry environment of the Red Sea. Unlike the Atlantic, where cold water and marine growth can quickly obscure shipwrecks, the warm, clear waters of the Red Sea provided excellent preservation conditions. For decades after the sinking, the THISTLEGORM lay forgotten on the bottom of the Red Sea. The war moved on, the strategic situation in North Africa changed, and the loss of one cargo ship among thousands was overshadowed by larger events. Local fishermen occasionally snagged their nets on the wreck, but its exact location and identity remained unknown to the outside world. The rediscovery of the THISTLEGORM is credited to the legendary French oceanographer Jacques Cousteau, who located the wreck in the 1950s during one of his Red Sea expeditions. Cousteau immediately recognized the historical significance of the find. Here was a perfectly preserved World War II cargo ship, with her military cargo still intact. The discovery was documented in Cousteau's films and writings, bringing the wreck to international attention. What makes the THISTLEGORM extraordinary is not just her historical significance, but the remarkable preservation of her cargo. In the ship's holds, divers can still see Bedford trucks with their tires intact, BSA motorcycles that look as if they could be driven away, and aircraft parts still in their original packaging. The dry conditions inside the sealed cargo holds have preserved materials that would have deteriorated quickly in other environments. The ship's locomotive, blown clear of the cargo hold by the explosion, sits upright on the seabed beside the wreck, its brass fittings still gleaming and its mechanical details clearly visible. Railway cars, intended for the Egyptian railway system, remain stacked in the holds exactly as they were loaded in British ports over 80 years ago. The preservation is so complete that divers can read manufacturers' labels and serial numbers on equipment that was state-of-the-art in 1941. The THISTLEGORM has become one of the world's most popular wreck diving destinations, attracting thousands of divers each year who come to explore this underwater museum of World War II technology. The wreck is large enough to require multiple dives to explore thoroughly, with each cargo hold offering different artifacts and historical insights. The ship's superstructure, while damaged by the explosion, still contains recognizable features like the bridge, crew quarters, and galley. Modern diving technology has allowed researchers to document the wreck in extraordinary detail. High-definition underwater cameras have captured images of artifacts that reveal details about wartime manufacturing, military logistics, and the daily lives of the crew. 3D mapping technology has created precise models of the wreck that allow virtual exploration by people who cannot visit in person. The wreck has also become an important site for marine biology research. Over the decades since her sinking, the THISTLEGORM has been colonized by a diverse array of marine life. Coral growth on the ship's structure has created artificial reef habitat, while the cargo holds provide shelter for fish and other marine organisms. The wreck demonstrates how human artifacts can become integrated into marine ecosystems over time. Conservation of the THISTLEGORM presents unique challenges. The wreck lies in international waters, making legal protection difficult to enforce. Souvenir hunting by some divers has resulted in the removal of smaller artifacts, while the constant stream of visitors has caused some damage to fragile structures. Egyptian authorities have implemented regulations to protect the site, but enforcement remains challenging. The THISTLEGORM serves as more than just a diving attraction. She is a memorial to the merchant sailors who died in her sinking, and a reminder of the global scope of World War II. The ship's cargo tells the story of Britain's industrial effort to supply Allied forces around the world, while her sinking illustrates the dangers faced by merchant mariners who kept supply lines open despite constant threats from enemy action. Recent expeditions have focused on documenting the wreck's condition and monitoring changes over time. The Red Sea's warm water and high salinity create different preservation conditions than those found in colder oceans, and researchers are studying how these factors affect the long-term survival of the wreck and her artifacts. The story of the THISTLEGORM reminds us that World War II was fought not just on battlefields, but on the world's shipping lanes, where merchant sailors risked their lives to transport the materials needed for victory. The ship and her cargo, preserved in the clear waters of the Red Sea, serve as a tangible link to that global conflict, and a tribute to the men who sailed her on her final voyage. 24 miles southeast of Pensacola, Florida, in 212 feet of crystal-clear Gulf of Mexico water, lies one of the most extraordinary artificial reefs ever created, the USS ORISKANY, a massive Essex-class aircraft carrier that once projected American naval power across the world's oceans, now serves as an underwater habitat for marine life and a destination for some of the world's most adventurous divers. Unlike the tragic sinkings we have explored, the ORISKANY's descent to the ocean floor was carefully planned and executed. On May 17, 2006, this 888-foot giant was deliberately sunk in a controlled demolition that took years of planning and millions of dollars to execute. The sinking was designed not to destroy the ship, but to transform her into the world's largest artificial reef, creating new habitat for marine life while preserving a piece of naval history. The USS ORISKANY was commissioned in 1950, during the early years of the Cold War when America was building a navy capable of projecting. She was one of the Essex-class carriers, ships that had proven their worth during World War II and were being modernized for the jet age. At nearly 900 feet long and displacing over 40,000 tons, the ORISKANY was a floating city capable of carrying up to 90 aircraft and 3,000 crew members. The ship's career spanned some of the most turbulent decades in American history. She served during the Korean War, patrolling the waters off the Korean peninsula and launching airstrikes against North Korean and Chinese forces. During the Vietnam War, she conducted multiple combat deployments to the South China Sea, her aircraft flying thousands of missions over North and South Vietnam. The ship earned numerous battle stars and commendations, but she also paid a heavy price for her service. On October 26, 1966, while operating off the coast of Vietnam, the ORISKANY suffered one of the worst fires in U.S. Navy history. A magnesium flare accidentally ignited in a storage locker, setting off a chain reaction that spread fire throughout several decks of the ship. The blaze killed 44 crew members and injured 156 others, demonstrating the inherent dangers of operating aircraft carriers in combat conditions. The ship survived the fire and continued her service, but the tragedy left permanent scars on her crew and their families. After the Vietnam War, the ORISKANY continued to serve the Navy in various capacities, but the advent of larger, nuclear-powered carriers gradually made the Essex-class ships obsolete. The ORISKANY was decommissioned in 1976, joining a growing fleet of surplus warships that the Navy needed to dispose of. For decades, she sat in mothballs, her fate uncertain as the Navy grappled with the enormous cost and complexity of scrapping such massive vessels. The idea of turning the ORISKANY into an artificial reef emerged in the 1990s, as marine biologists and diving enthusiasts recognized the potential value of large shipwrecks as underwater habitats. Artificial reefs had been created before using smaller vessels, but nothing on the scale of an aircraft carrier had ever been attempted. The project would require unprecedented cooperation between the Navy, environmental agencies, and civilian contractors. The process of preparing the ORISKANY for sinking was extraordinarily complex and expensive. Every hazardous material had to be removed from the ship: fuel, oil, hydraulic fluid, asbestos insulation, and countless other substances that could harm the marine environment. The ship's nuclear reactor had been removed years earlier, but thousands of other systems had to be cleaned or removed entirely. The environmental remediation took years and cost over $20 million. Workers had to remove miles of electrical cable, tons of insulation, and countless pieces of equipment that contained hazardous materials. The ship's fuel tanks were cleaned and ventilated, her machinery spaces were stripped of oil and lubricants, and her aircraft elevators were secured in the down position to prevent them from becoming traps for marine life. The Navy also had to address security concerns about sinking a former warship. Classified equipment and documents had long since been removed, but the ship's design and construction still contained sensitive information. Certain areas of the ship were sealed or modified to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive systems, while maintaining the overall integrity of the artificial reef. The sinking itself was a carefully choreographed operation that took place on May 17, 2000. Explosive charges were placed at strategic points on the ship's hull, designed to flood her compartments in a controlled sequence that would ensure she sank upright and intact. The operation was monitored by Navy personnel, environmental observers, and representatives from the Artificial Reef Program. The ORISKANY took just 37 minutes to sink, settling upright on the sandy bottom of the Gulf of Mexico in 212 feet of water. Her flight deck now sits at a depth of about 145 feet, making her accessible to advanced recreational divers while still challenging enough to deter inexperienced visitors. The controlled sinking was considered a complete success. The ship landed exactly where planned and remained structurally intact. The transformation of the ORISKANY from warship to reef began immediately. Within weeks of her sinking, marine life began to colonize the massive structure. Small fish were the first to arrive, followed by larger predators attracted by the new food source. Coral larvae began to settle on the ship's surfaces, starting the slow process of biological transformation that would eventually cover the steel hull with living reef. The Gulf of Mexico's warm waters and abundant marine life made the ORISKANY an ideal location for an artificial reef. The ship's complex structure, with its multiple decks, compartments, and overhangs, created diverse habitat types that could support different species of marine life. The flight deck became a gathering place for large pelagic fish, while the ship's interior spaces provided shelter for smaller species. Within a few years, the ORISKANY had become one of the most productive artificial reefs in the Gulf of Mexico. Marine biologists documented hundreds of species living on and around the wreck, from tiny invertebrates to large sharks and rays. The ship's aircraft elevators, hangar deck, and island superstructure all developed their own distinct ecological communities. The wreck has also become a world-class diving destination, attracting experienced divers from around the globe. The ship's size means that multiple dives are required to explore even a fraction of her structure. Divers can swim through the hangar deck, where aircraft were once stored and maintained, explore the ship's island superstructure, where her captain once commanded operations, and venture into the deep compartments, where her crew lived and worked. The diving experience on the ORISKANY is unlike anything else in the world. The ship's massive scale creates an almost surreal underwater landscape where divers feel dwarfed by the enormous structures around them. The flight deck, nearly 3 football fields long, stretches beyond the limits of underwater visibility. The ship's island, rising from the flight deck like an underwater skyscraper, provides a dramatic backdrop for underwater photography. Safety considerations for diving the ORISKANY are significant. The ship's depth puts her at the limits of recreational diving, requiring advanced training and equipment. The ship's complex interior spaces present entanglement and entrapment hazards, while the Gulf of Mexico's sometimes challenging conditions can create additional risks. Despite these challenges, thousands of divers have safely explored the wreck since her sinking. The ORISKANY has also become an important research platform for studying artificial reef development and marine ecosystem dynamics. Scientists have used the wreck to study how marine communities develop on artificial structures, how fish populations respond to new habitat, and how artificial reefs can be designed to maximize their ecological benefits. Research on the ORISKANY has revealed some surprising findings about artificial reef ecology. The ship's vertical structure creates upwelling currents that bring nutrients from the deep water to the surface, enhancing productivity throughout the water column. The wreck also serves as a stepping stone for marine life moving between natural reefs, helping to connect previously isolated populations. The success of the ORISKANY project has inspired similar artificial reef projects around the world. Other decommissioned warships have been prepared for sinking as artificial reefs, though none have matched the scale and complexity of the aircraft carrier project. The lessons learned from the ORISKANY's preparation and sinking have been applied to subsequent projects, improving both environmental protection and cost-effectiveness. The wreck has also become an important economic asset for the Pensacola area, attracting diving tourists from around the world and supporting local dive operators, hotels, and restaurants. The economic impact of the artificial reef has far exceeded initial projections, demonstrating that environmental conservation and economic development can work together. Monitoring of the ORISKANY continues more than 15 years after her sinking. Regular surveys document changes in the marine community, assess the structural integrity of the wreck, and monitor for any environmental impacts. So far, the ship has exceeded all expectations as both an artificial reef and a diving destination. The USS ORISKANY represents a unique approach to naval vessel disposal, one that transforms instruments of war into platforms for life. The ship that once launched aircraft on combat missions now launches new generations of marine life into the Gulf of Mexico's ecosystem. Her transformation from warship to reef demonstrates how human artifacts can be repurposed to serve environmental conservation while preserving historical heritage. As we ascend from the ORISKANY's flight deck toward the surface, we leave behind a ship that has found new purpose in the depths. The carrier that once projected American power across the world's oceans now serves as a sanctuary for marine life and a destination for underwater explorers. In her transformation, she reminds us that even the most powerful instruments of human conflict can be transformed into forces for creation and conservation. In the cold, dark waters of Stockholm Harbor, 105 feet beneath the surface, lay one of history's most magnificent failures. For 333 years, the Swedish warship VASA rested on the muddy bottom of the harbor, her ornate carvings and gilded decorations preserved in the oxygen-poor water, like a time capsule from the Age of King. When she was finally raised in 1961, she emerged as the most complete and well-preserved 17th-century ship ever discovered, offering an unprecedented window into the golden age of naval warfare and royal ambition. The Vasa was not just any warship. She was intended to be the crown jewel of the Swedish Navy, a floating symbol of King Gustavus Adolphus's power and Sweden's emergence as a major European power. Commissioned in 1625 during the height of Sweden's imperial ambitions, the ship was designed to be the most powerful and beautiful warship in the Baltic Sea, capable of projecting Swedish naval power across the region while serving as a magnificent display of royal wealth and artistic achievement. The ship's construction took place at the Royal Shipyard in Stockholm, under the direction of Dutch shipwright Henrik Hybertsson. The Vasa was built using the most advanced shipbuilding techniques of the era, incorporating lessons learned from decades of naval warfare and maritime engineering. At 226 feet long and armed with 64 bronze cannons, she was one of the most heavily armed ships of her time, designed to dominate any naval engagement in the Baltic. But the Vasa was more than just a weapon of war. She was a work of art. Her hull was decorated with hundreds of carved and gilded sculptures, depicting everything from biblical scenes to royal heraldry. Lions, angels, warriors, and mythological creatures adorned every surface, each carving meticulously crafted by master artisans. The ship's stern was particularly elaborate, featuring a massive sculpture of the Swedish coat of arms, surrounded by allegorical figures representing the virtues of the kingdom. The level of decoration on the Vasa was unprecedented for a warship. More than 500 sculptures and ornaments covered her hull, many of them gilded with real gold leaf. The ship's figurehead was a massive lion, symbol of Swedish royal power, while her stern galleries featured intricate carvings that told the story of Swedish military victories and royal genealogy. The overall effect was intended to inspire awe and fear in equal measure, a floating palace that demonstrated Sweden's cultural sophistication and military might. The ship's armament was equally impressive. Her 64 cannons were cast from bronze rather than iron, making them both more durable and more prestigious. The guns were arranged on 2 gun decks, with the heaviest cannons on the lower deck and lighter guns above. The ship also carried swivel guns for close-range fighting and was equipped with small arms for her crew of 445 men. However, the Vasa's magnificent design contained a fatal flaw. In their eagerness to create the most impressive warship possible, the designers had made the ship top-heavy. The elaborate superstructure, heavy bronze cannons, and massive decorative elements raised the ship's center of gravity to a dangerous level. The problem was compounded by the king's insistence on adding a second gun deck, which further increased the ship's weight and height. The ship's stability problems were recognized during construction, but political pressure and royal expectations prevented any significant modifications. Test firings of the cannons during construction caused the ship to heel alarmingly, and experienced sailors expressed concerns about her seaworthiness. However, the king was eager to see his magnificent warship in action, and the launch proceeded as scheduled. On August 10th, 1628, the Vasa set sail from Stockholm on her maiden voyage. The occasion was a grand celebration, with crowds gathering along the waterfront to witness the departure of Sweden's newest and most magnificent warship. The ship was fully dressed with flags and banners, her crew in their finest uniforms, her bronze cannons gleaming in the afternoon sun. The Vasa had sailed less than a mile from the royal palace when disaster struck. A sudden gust of wind caught the ship's sails, causing her to heel sharply to port. Water poured through the open gun ports on the lower deck, and within minutes, the magnificent warship was sinking in full view of the horrified crowds on shore. The sinking was swift and catastrophic. Despite being in relatively shallow water close to shore, the Vasa went down so quickly that many of her crew were trapped below decks. Rescue boats rushed to the scene, but at least 30 people died in the disaster, including women and children who had been aboard for the maiden voyage celebration. The immediate aftermath of the sinking was a national scandal. King Gustavus Adolphus ordered an investigation into the disaster, seeking to assign blame for the loss of his magnificent warship. The investigation revealed the fundamental design flaws that had doomed the ship, but political considerations prevented any meaningful accountability. The shipwright Henrik Heibertsson had died the year before the launch, conveniently removing the most obvious target for blame. Attempts to salvage the Vasa began almost immediately. The ship had sunk in only 105 feet of water, making her theoretically recoverable with 17th-century technology. However, the techniques available at the time were crude and largely unsuccessful. Divers using primitive diving bells managed to recover most of the ship's valuable bronze cannons, but the ship herself remained on the bottom. Over the centuries, The VASA became a local legend in Stockholm. Fishermen occasionally snagged their nets on the wreck, and divers reported seeing the ghostly outline of the ship on the harbor bottom. However, the exact location of the wreck was gradually forgotten as the city grew and the harbor was modified for modern shipping. The rediscovery of the VASA is credited to marine archaeologist Anders Franzén, who spent years searching Stockholm harbor for the lost warship. Using historical records and systematic sonar searches, Franzén finally located the wreck in 1956. What he found exceeded his wildest expectations. The ship was not only intact, but remarkably well preserved, her decorative carvings still clearly visible after more than 3 centuries underwater. The preservation of the VASA was due to the unique conditions in Stockholm harbor. The Baltic Sea's low salinity and cold temperature created an environment hostile to the shipworms that normally destroy wooden vessels. The harbor's muddy bottom had also helped protect the ship's lower hull from damage, while the lack of strong currents prevented the wreck from being scattered or abraded. The decision to raise the VASA was not made lightly. The ship represented an unprecedented archaeological treasure, but the technical challenges of raising a 300-year-old wooden ship were enormous. The project required the development of new techniques for underwater archaeology and marine conservation, as well as massive financial investment from the Swedish government. The raising of the VASA began in 1959 and took 2 years to complete. The operation involved digging tunnels under the ship's hull and passing steel cables through them, then using floating cranes to lift the massive vessel from the bottom. The process was painstakingly slow, as any sudden movement could have caused the fragile hull to break apart. On April 24, 1961, the VASA broke the surface of Stockholm harbor for the first time in 333 years. The moment was broadcast live on Swedish television and watched by millions of people around the world. The ship that emerged from the depths was a revelation. Her hull was intact. Her decorative carvings were clearly visible, and thousands of artifacts were preserved in her holds and compartments. The conservation of the VASA presented unprecedented challenges. The ship's wood had been saturated with water for over 3 centuries, and exposure to air would cause it to shrink, crack, and eventually disintegrate. Swedish conservators developed a revolutionary treatment process using polyethylene glycol, PEG, to replace the water in the wood's cellular structure, stabilizing the timber and preventing deterioration. The conservation process took decades to complete. Every piece of the ship had to be carefully treated, from the massive hull timbers to the smallest decorative elements. The ship's thousands of artifacts, everything from sailors' personal belongings to the ship's navigational instruments, also required individual conservation treatment. Today, the VASA is displayed in her own museum in Stockholm, where she serves as one of the world's premier maritime archaeological attractions. The museum allows visitors to walk around the ship at multiple levels, examining her construction techniques, decorative elements, and the artifacts recovered from her holds. The level of preservation is so complete that visitors can see tool marks on the timber, read inscriptions carved by the ship's crew, and examine personal belongings that provide intimate details about life aboard a 17th-century warship. The VASA has revolutionized our understanding of 17th-century shipbuilding, naval warfare, and daily life at sea. The ship's construction techniques, revealed through detailed analysis of her hull, have provided insights into the transfer of shipbuilding technology between different European nations. Her armament and equipment have illuminated the evolution of naval warfare during the early modern period. The artifacts recovered from the VASA provide an unparalleled glimpse into the lives of 17th-century sailors. Personal belongings found in the ship's compartments include clothing, shoes, games, musical instruments, and even the remains of meals that were being prepared when the ship sank. These objects tell the human story behind the magnificent warship, revealing the hopes, fears, and daily routines of the men who sailed her. The VASA story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing appearance over function, political pressure over engineering judgment, and royal ambition over practical considerations. The ship that was intended to project Swedish power instead became a symbol of the hubris that can lead to spectacular failure. Yet in her preservation and display, the VASA has achieved a kind of immortality that her builders never intended. The ship that sailed for less than an hour has become one of the world's most visited maritime museums, educating millions of people about maritime history and the golden age of sailing ships. In her failure as a warship, she has succeeded beyond measure as a teacher and inspiration for future generations. Off the rocky coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, in 180 feet of crystalline Mediterranean water, lies the oldest shipwreck we will explore tonight. And perhaps the most mysterious. Here, scattered across the sandy bottom, are the remains of a Roman cargo ship that sank over 2,000 years ago, carrying with it a treasure trove of ancient artifacts that has revolutionized our understanding of classical civilization and ancient technology. The Antikythera wreck was discovered in 1900 by Greek sponge divers who were seeking shelter from a storm. What they found on the seabed would challenge everything historians thought they knew about the technological capabilities of the ancient world. Among the bronze statues, pottery, and luxury goods scattered across the wreck site was a corroded bronze mechanism so complex and sophisticated that it would take decades to understand its true purpose and significance. The ship itself dates to approximately 70 to 60 BCE, during the height of the Roman Republic's expansion across the Mediterranean. She was a substantial vessel for her time, estimated at around 130 feet in length, large enough to carry a diverse cargo of luxury goods, artwork, and passengers across the dangerous waters of the ancient Mediterranean. The ship was likely traveling from the Greek islands toward Rome, carrying treasures looted from conquered territories, or luxury goods destined for wealthy Roman collectors. The discovery of the wreck was entirely accidental. Captain Dimitrios Kondos and his crew of sponge divers from the island of Symi were returning from diving grounds off the coast of North Africa when a severe storm forced them to seek shelter near Antikythera. While waiting for the weather to improve, diver Elias Stadiatis decided to explore the local waters for sponges. What Stadiatis found at the bottom of the sea was far more valuable than any sponge bed. Scattered across the sandy bottom were bronze and marble statues, pottery vessels, and other artifacts that clearly dated to ancient times. When he surfaced and reported his discovery, the crew initially thought he was suffering from nitrogen narcosis, the rapture of the deep that can cause hallucinations in deep-water divers. However, when other divers descended to investigate, they confirmed Stadiatis' report. Here was an ancient shipwreck of unprecedented richness, containing artifacts that would be priceless in any museum. The Greek government was immediately notified, and what followed was one of the first major underwater archaeological expeditions in history. The initial recovery efforts, conducted between 1900 and 1901, were heroic, but primitive by modern standards. Greek Navy divers, using the crude diving equipment available at the time, worked in dangerous conditions to recover artifacts from the wreck. The depth of 180 feet was at the very limit of what was possible with the diving technology of the era, and several divers were killed or permanently disabled by decompression sickness during the recovery operations. Despite the dangers and limitations of early 20th century diving technology, the recovery effort was remarkably successful. The divers brought up a treasure trove of ancient artifacts, including bronze and marble statues, luxury pottery, glassware, jewelry, and coins. Among the most spectacular finds were larger-than-life bronze statues, including the famous ANTIKYTHERA youth and fragments of what may have been a statue of Hercules. But it was a small, corroded bronze object, initially overlooked among the more spectacular finds, that would prove to be the most significant discovery of all. The object, about the size of a shoebox and heavily encrusted with marine growth, appeared to be nothing more than a lump of corroded bronze. It wasn't until months later, when the artifact was being cleaned and studied, that researchers realized they had found something extraordinary. As the marine incrustation was carefully removed, the object revealed itself to be a complex mechanical device containing dozens of precisely crafted bronze gears. The mechanism was far more sophisticated than anything historians believed the ancient Greeks and Romans were capable of creating. Initial attempts to understand the device were frustrated by its corroded condition and the limited archaeological techniques available in the early 1900s. For decades, the Antikythera mechanism remained a mystery. Various theories were proposed to explain its purpose. Some suggested it was an astrolabe for navigation. Others thought it might be a clockwork device for telling time. A few researchers even suggested it was evidence of ancient contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. So advanced did the technology appear to be for its time period. The breakthrough in understanding the mechanism came in the 1950s and 1960s, when advances in X-ray technology allowed researchers to see inside the corroded bronze casing without damaging the delicate internal components. The X-rays revealed a device of stunning complexity, a system of at least 37 meshing bronze gears that could perform complex astronomical calculations. Further research, using increasingly sophisticated imaging techniques, revealed that the Antikythera mechanism was essentially an ancient analog computer designed to predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets. The device could calculate eclipses, track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games, and predict the positions of known planets with remarkable accuracy. It represented a level of technological sophistication that historians had not believed possible for ancient civilizations. The mechanism's complexity is staggering. The main gear wheel has 223 teeth, while other gears have tooth counts that correspond to various astronomical cycles known to ancient astronomers. The device could track the 19-year Metonic cycle that reconciles lunar and solar calendars, the 76-year Calippic cycle that refines the Metonic cycle, and even the 223-month Saros cycle used to predict eclipses. Recent research using advanced CT scanning and 3D modeling has revealed even more sophisticated features of the mechanism. The device included a differential gear system, a technology that wasn't thought to have been reinvented until the 16th century. It also incorporated a complex system of epicyclic gears that could model the elliptical orbits of celestial bodies, demonstrating that ancient astronomers had a far more sophisticated understanding of planetary motion than previously believed. The discovery of the Antikythera mechanism has forced historians to completely reassess the technological capabilities of ancient civilizations. The device demonstrates that ancient Greek craftsmen possessed mechanical engineering skills that rival those of 18th-century clockmakers. It suggests that there was a tradition of complex mechanical engineering in the ancient world that has been almost entirely lost to history. The mechanism also raises intriguing questions about what other advanced technologies might have existed in the ancient world. If the Greeks could create such a sophisticated astronomical computer, what other mechanical devices might they have built? The loss of ancient technical knowledge, possibly due to the decline of classical civilization and the rise of Christianity, may have set back human technological development by centuries. The ship that carried the Antikythera mechanism was clearly transporting luxury goods and works of art, possibly looted from Greek territories by Roman conquerors. The presence of such a sophisticated scientific instrument among the cargo suggests that the ship may have been carrying the personal belongings of a wealthy Roman collector, or perhaps a Greek scholar relocating to Rome. Modern archaeological expeditions to the Antikythera wreck site have revealed that much of the ship and her cargo remains buried in the sandy bottom. Advanced underwater archaeological techniques, including remotely operated vehicles and sophisticated metal detectors, have located additional artifacts and structural remains that were missed by the early 20th century divers. Recent expeditions have recovered additional fragments of the mechanism, as well as other significant artifacts including luxury glassware, bronze objects, and human remains. The discovery of human skeletal remains has allowed researchers to conduct DNA analysis and other studies that provide insights into the people who sailed on ancient ships. The Antikythera mechanism has been the subject of intensive study by an international team of researchers who have used every available technology to understand its construction and operation. High-resolution CT scans have revealed details of the gear trains, while surface imaging has uncovered previously unreadable inscriptions that provide clues about the device's operation and purpose. Researchers have created detailed reconstructions of the mechanism, both physical and virtual, that demonstrate how the device would have operated when it was new. These reconstructions show that the mechanism was operated by turning a hand crank, which would cause the various dials and pointers to move and display astronomical information. The device was essentially a portable planetarium that could be used to demonstrate and predict celestial phenomena. The implications of the Antikythera mechanism extend far beyond archaeology and ancient history. The device demonstrates that human technological capability can be lost and forgotten, only to be rediscovered centuries or millennia later. It serves as a reminder that our assumptions about the past may be incomplete, and that ancient civilizations may have achieved far more than we give them credit for. The mechanism also highlights the importance of preserving and protecting underwater archaeological sites. The Antikythera wreck has yielded treasures that have revolutionized our understanding of ancient technology, but many other ancient wrecks remain unexplored or have been damaged by treasure hunters and commercial exploitation. Current research on the mechanism continues to reveal new details about its construction and capabilities. Advanced imaging techniques are uncovering previously unreadable inscriptions that may provide additional clues about the device's creators and users. Computer modeling is helping researchers understand how the mechanism's complex gear trains would have functioned and what astronomical phenomena it could predict. The Antikythera mechanism stands as one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the modern era. This ancient computer, recovered from a Roman shipwreck, has fundamentally changed our understanding of ancient technology and demonstrated that our ancestors were capable of far more sophisticated engineering than we previously believed. In the depths of the Mediterranean, this 2,000-year-old device continues to challenge our assumptions about the past and inspire our vision of the future. as we ascend from the depths of our underwater journey, leaving behind the ghostly hulls and scattered artifacts of these 5 remarkable shipwrecks. We carry with us more than just stories of maritime disaster and discovery. We carry the weight of human history itself, preserved in the crushing depths where time moves differently and the past remains eternally present. Each wreck we have explored tonight represents a different chapter in humanity's relationship with the sea, a different moment when human ambition met the ocean's power, and a different lesson about the fragility and resilience of human achievement. From the ancient bronze gears of the ANTIKYTHERA mechanism to the modern steel hull of the USS ORISKANY, these underwater museums span over 2 millennia of human technological development and maritime adventure. The RMS TITANIC, resting in her Atlantic grave at a depth that defies easy comprehension, reminds us that even our greatest achievements are temporary. The ship that was once called unsinkable now lies broken on the ocean floor, her grand staircase open to the eternal darkness, her luxury suites home only to deep-sea creatures that have never known sunlight. Yet in her preservation by the deep ocean, the Titanic continues to teach us about human hubris, technological overconfidence, and the eternal power of the sea to humble our greatest ambitions. The SS THISTLEGORM, with her cargo hold still packed with the machinery of war, serves as an underwater memorial to the global conflict that shaped the 20th century. Her Bedford trucks and BSA motorcycles, preserved in the clear waters of the Red Sea, remind us that World War II was fought not just on battlefields, but on the world's shipping lanes, where merchant sailors risked their lives to transport the materials needed for victory. The ship's transformation from cargo vessel to artificial reef demonstrates how the instruments of war can become sanctuaries for life. The USS ORISKANY represents something entirely different, a deliberate transformation from instrument of war to platform for conservation. The aircraft carrier that once projected American naval power across the world's oceans now serves as the world's largest artificial reef, providing habitat for marine life while preserving a piece of naval history. Her story reminds us that even the most powerful weapons of human conflict can be repurposed to serve environmental conservation and scientific research. The VASA, raised from Stockholm Harbor after 333 years underwater, stands as perhaps the most complete time capsule from the age of sail. Her ornate carvings and gilded decorations, preserved by the cold, low salinity waters of the Baltic Sea, offer an unparalleled window into 17th century craftsmanship, naval warfare, and royal ambition. The ship that sailed for less than an hour has become one of the world's most visited maritime museums, teaching millions of people about the golden age of sailing ships and the dangers of prioritizing appearance over function. The ANTIKYTHERA wreck, the oldest site we explored, has yielded perhaps the most revolutionary discovery of all. The ancient mechanism found among her cargo has fundamentally changed our understanding of ancient technology and demonstrated that our ancestors were capable of far more sophisticated engineering than we previously believed. This 2,000-year-old analog computer reminds us that human knowledge and capability can be lost and forgotten, only to be rediscovered centuries later in the most unexpected places. Together, these 5 wrecks illustrate the evolution of human maritime technology and the unchanging relationship between humanity and the sea. They show us how shipbuilding techniques have evolved from the wooden hulls and bronze fittings of ancient vessels to the steel construction and advanced engineering of modern ships. They demonstrate how the purposes of sea travel have changed over time, from the luxury passenger service of the Titanic era to the military logistics of World War II to the environmental conservation efforts of today. But perhaps most importantly, these wrecks remind us that the ocean is the ultimate repository of human history. In the deep waters where pressure and cold preserve what time and weather would destroy on land, the sea maintains an archive of human achievement and failure that spans millennia. Every shipwreck is a library, every artifact a book, every corroded fitting a sentence in the ongoing story of humanity's relationship with the sea. The technology that allows us to explore these deep wrecks continues to evolve at a rapid pace. Advanced, remotely operated vehicles can now capture high-definition video in the deepest ocean trenches, while sophisticated sonar systems can map underwater sites with extraordinary precision. Virtual reality technology allows people around the world to visit these wrecks without leaving their homes, while 3D printing enables the creation of perfect replicas of artifacts that can be studied without risking damage to the originals. Yet for all our technological advances, the fundamental challenges of deep-sea exploration remain daunting. The ocean depths are still among the most alien and hostile environments on our planet, requiring specialized equipment and expertise that pushes the limits of human engineering. Every expedition to these deep wrecks is a complex undertaking that requires careful planning, sophisticated technology, and considerable financial resources. The conservation of these underwater archaeological sites presents ongoing challenges that require international cooperation and long-term commitment. The Titanic, slowly deteriorating under the assault of iron-eating bacteria, may not survive another century in recognizable form. The THISTLEGORM, subjected to constant visitation by divers, faces damage from both natural processes and human impact. The ORISKANY, deliberately sunk as an artificial reef, requires ongoing monitoring to ensure she continues to serve her conservation purpose without creating environmental hazards. The legal and ethical questions surrounding these wrecks are equally complex. Who owns these underwater sites? How should they be protected from commercial exploitation and treasure hunting? What responsibilities do we have to preserve them for future generations? These questions become particularly challenging when dealing with sites that cross international boundaries or involve military vessels that may still be considered sovereign territory. The study of deep shipwrecks has also contributed enormously to our understanding of ocean environments and marine ecosystems. These artificial reefs provide unique opportunities to study how marine communities develop on human-made structures, how deep-sea environments affect the preservation of organic and inorganic materials, and how underwater archaeological sites can be integrated into marine conservation efforts. The human stories behind these wrecks continue to resonate across the centuries. The passengers and crew of the Titanic, the merchant sailors of the THISTLEGORM, the naval aviators of the ORISKANY, the craftsmen of the VASA, and the ancient mariners of the ANTIKYTHERA ship all shared the fundamental human experience of trusting their lives to vessels designed to carry them safely across the sea. Their stories remind us that behind every shipwreck are real people with hopes, dreams, fears, and families who loved them. As we conclude our journey through these underwater museums, we must acknowledge that we have visited only a tiny fraction of the shipwrecks that rest on the ocean floor. Millions of vessels have been lost to the sea over the millennia, of human maritime activity, and most will never be found or explored. Each represents a story that will remain forever untold, a piece of human history that will remain forever hidden in the depths. The 5 wrecks we have explored tonight are remarkable, not just for their historical significance or state of preservation, but for their accessibility to human exploration and study. They represent the intersection of historical importance, technological capability, and human determination that makes deep-sea archaeology possible. They remind us that the ocean, for all its vastness and mystery, can still yield its secrets to those with the courage and technology to seek them. The deep ocean will continue to guard its treasures jealously, revealing them only to those who approach with respect, preparation, and the proper tools. As our technology continues to advance and our understanding of the ocean environment grows, we will undoubtedly discover new wrecks and uncover new secrets from the depths. Each discovery will add another chapter to the ongoing story of humanity's relationship with the sea. But we must also remember that these underwater archaeological sites are finite and fragile resources that require our protection and stewardship. The wrecks we have explored tonight have survived for decades or centuries in the deep ocean's preserving environment. But they are not immune to damage from human activity, natural processes, or environmental change. Our responsibility as explorers and students of maritime history is to ensure that these underwater museums remain available for future generations to study and appreciate. The deepest shipwrecks ever discovered continue to call to us from the ocean's depths, inviting us to explore their mysteries and learn from their stories. They remind us that the sea, for all its beauty and power, is also humanity's greatest museum, a vast repository of our shared maritime heritage that stretches back to the very beginning of human civilization. In the crushing depths where eternal darkness reigns and pressure would destroy any unprotected human visitor, these ships wait patiently for the next generation of explorers to discover their secrets. They are time capsules from ages past, teachers from the depths, and guardians of stories that must not be forgotten. As long as humans continue to venture onto the sea, these underwater monuments will remain relevant, reminding us of where we have been and inspiring us to continue exploring the vast mysteries that lie beneath the waves.